And we are live.
Hi there. Welcome to Peppers and Flowers, where sales and marketing doesn't make sense. Please join us for the conversation.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on this? Large companies, multi-million dollar companies, and you can just interpret that however you want, right? So large companies, mid-size, small, mom and pop, maybe like solopreneurs, just single people, and then startups, okay? I think large or startup or small, I think they have very similar challenges.
In their sales and marketing?
I would say normally it's sales and marketing for sure. But I've noticed that large companies compared to like smaller companies, they kind of tend to have the same challenges in sales and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I would say I agree because I remember I used to work for a boutique web firm in Orange County, and they were a $5 million company. And they did boutique, kind of custom websites, custom campaigns for online marketing. But then, they would cater to customers who are large enterprise customers with, multi-million dollar business, large, complex solutions that they would provide their customers. And so I looked at these two kind of business owners in the same room one time in a conference room, and I was like, well, what's the main difference between like a large company and a smaller organization? And I noticed that they're both doing good work. They're both doing stuff that makes a difference and makes sense. So there were more similarities than I saw differences. So I realized the difference between a larger company and a smaller company is really revenue, and that revenue is based off of maybe the product or service that's being provided. Some items just have a larger ticket. A large CRM system, for example, might take hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to implement, rather than maybe a custom boutique website that might be 10 to 20K. Both are great services that people need, but then at the same time, they have a different price tag. So what I'm trying to get to answer the question is basically, products and services can vary, but the process that these companies have to go through to stay in business is usually the same. This boutique web firm, they have to have a sales process to get new customers. They have to have a marketing and advertising department to get the leads generated. And so do these larger companies. These larger companies are at networking events, at mixers, and so are these smaller companies too. So the processes are the same. It's just that their products and services vary, and that's what makes them larger or smaller. So, and what we can get into today maybe is talk about what those processes are for sales and marketing, and how companies with the right attitude can benefit by getting the right process in place.
Yeah. That's the pattern I've been seeing. There's some companies like startups. I work with a lot of startups, and some are a little more organized than others. Some might have a little more funding than others, or a little further along. But they kind of, I listen to what they say, and usually it's like, yeah, we're thinking about a go-to-market strategy, and that just typically means like, what's the first thing we're going to do when we like start advertising, or first thing we're going to do when we try to process customers or clients, or just kind of general stuff. And I've heard the same thing with, well, when I say large, I mean larger. They're doing 5 million, or so I would say like mid-size, 5 million to 500 million. but it's still kind of mid small area. Um, so just larger businesses, but they even like hundreds of millions, right? 500 million. I hear the same kind of plan sometimes from them. Sometimes I hear larger companies say like, we haven't utilized social media very much. We just need help with that, right? But everything else seems to be in order. Um, but up to that point, I think, man, shouldn't like 10 years ago, if you said large company needs help with marketing, I would have gone, no. Like they know what they're doing. That's how they got there. They know they
Right.
like have a formula. They have this all figured out.
Yeah.
And it's not really the case because even they're saying stuff that startups are saying, like, we need help with, we need to expand our let's say to do commercial and residential sides of service or products, whatever, they like, we really do well at residential, but we need help with the commercial side. We need help to put a system together. So in a way, it's like they might not have the same problems, but normally they're around the same topics, which is like a system for something that normally has to do with like a sales and marketing topic.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Like the
Um,
the, the startups and the larger companies are saying the same thing. It's kind of strange to think.
yeah.
I mean, it's not strange after you witness it, but for the first couple of times you do, you're kind of, I think it's easy to get thrown off because you think things are supposed to be so much more complicated,
Hmm.
and they're really not. Besides the fact that it's just their infrastructure, they have more clients to manage. Maybe they have bigger systems. There's a higher chance for error because they have users using their system. I mean, like there's a little more management for sure, but
Yeah.
for the most part, you could take a system built for a startup to help it scale and a similar system to help a larger company scale too. And you know,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just human resources, right? A company with 500 employees is run differently than a company with 50 employees, and so at that point, it's really managing people. So, say you have a team of 20 to 30 sales reps. Well, now you need a nice, robust CRM system to manage those folks, so they could input their prospects, their pipeline, and all that good stuff, and track their sales. Whereas if it's a team of say 50 and maybe only have 4 or 5 sales reps, well, maybe the CRM system doesn't have to be as robust. Maybe it could just be, working off of, more of one-on-one meetings with a manager, running off of Excel spreadsheets for lead tracking, things of that nature. But yeah, these larger companies, they can afford to get these bigger systems to manage their people. So ultimately, it's not just human resources, but it's a big part of it. But it's also getting into managing people's sales pipeline from a sales and marketing and lead generation, overall lead flow. So I would say, the processes could be very similar. I mean, there might be a little bit of a nuance based on culture and management and how people run their businesses.
Oh,
But,
sure.
but ultimately, marketing is marketing and sales is sales. These disciplines are above and beyond anything else that a company, is or does, because these are principles that are just out there in business in general. So it's not like, oh, well, Cisco's marketing is different than like a Verizon Wireless marketing because, we're Cisco. No, marketing is marketing, but then how people do it, I think they have to abide by a certain, I would say, set of rules, but also kind of say that loosely because, you can do things uniquely, but at the same time, marketing principles, if you don't get enough um, leads, well, you're not going to get enough closed deals. And so how do you generate those leads, right? So I would say the process is something that's very important. And maybe we can get into that a little bit more. Is why are some companies why do some companies have better processes and flows rather than other companies when it comes to sales and marketing?
Yeah. So, okay, here's something I think you'll find really interesting. Now, this pattern I've seen between like similarities, because frankly, they're just businesses, right? And it doesn't matter what size you are, there's still like a relentless force that seems to always be right around the corner just to kind of give you a really hard time when you least expect it. You know, like your problems don't vanish as you grow larger and larger. Sometimes actually your problems get um more known. Like your problems grow sometimes when you get bigger. Like, you know, there's no like grace period in business. It always just is like something new that you have to figure out or work through. But I always think the best thing you can ever do is this. Here's some free advice. And I would say this is kind of like my philosophy when you're ever trying to figure something out in business. It's always this. It's a three-step thing. The first thing to figure out is your foundation. And the foundation, this is kind of nerdy and kind of boring and maybe basic, but it's true. Whatever your business is um, developed on, like the standards and stuff. So like, you know, businesses have pillars, like pillar one, we believe in this. And then there's that. Pillar two, we're all about this. Um, as lame as I kind of think those can be sometimes, understanding your foundation, your pillars, what you're about, like kind of going back to your roots in a way, like understanding fully. Because if I was like, James, can you explain yourself to me? You probably could, but I think it would be a little more difficult than you think it might be.
Right, right. We're
Or like,
always
Daniel, can you
changing.
explain yourself to me? I go, okay, yeah. And then I'm like, oh darn. Well, I think I'm a nice person. I think I try to do the right thing. I think I'm funny. And you're probably thinking, no, Daniel, you're not funny. Like, yeah, it's not true. Right. So like what you perceive yourself to be doesn't necessarily mean what everyone outside perceives yourself to be. So it's a little more complicated or
Yeah,
it can be complicated.
yeah, I agree.
So it's like understanding your foundation first and going, okay, cool. Then the next step I would say is trying your best to identify what current challenges you're facing, which I know can be a little difficult because
Hmm.
challenges might not present themselves unless you do something as a process or system. And then you get challenges that show themselves along the way. But just currently, first thing is identifying your foundation. Second thing is identifying like just challenges that you're facing
Hmm.
that are imminent. And the third thing is identifying goals. But the goals can't be generic. Like we want to increase sales. They need to be more specific. Like we want to increase our sales for this product. And then maybe a goal would be an extension of that goal would be like, we want to increase sales for that product and we want to keep clients on, or we want to, push that inventory for 6 months or something. So it's really specific.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so if you have a foundational understanding, which I think you should always go back to at any point if you kind of feel like you're losing touch with that. You should always have an understanding of what your goals are, whether they're short term or long term, whatever it is. And then
Hmm.
identifying your challenges and then keeping your challenges bucket open. So when you start systems, you always can add new things like, hey, here's a challenge we're facing. So once you have your foundation, your challenges and goals identified,
Hmm.
creating a sales system or a marketing system is so much easier because you now know how to form it around your messaging, your branding, your
Hmm.
sales process, your marketing, all that stuff.
Yeah,
It's so much easier because
yeah,
otherwise you're trying to design something based off potentially assumptions or based off just
right.
we want to increase sales. So you have a generic idea, you make a generic
Hmm.
plan,
Right.
and it may or may not work. And if it works, it's probably
Yeah.
due to some luck a little bit. But
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think sometimes people rely on that. They think that, well, I don't really need a process. I don't need to have any kind of principles in place. We just work hard. We go out there, and sometimes we close sales. And they're happy with that. They don't think they need to develop any further. But you're right. I think if you have some foundational principles and things that ground you, and specific goals and specific measurements, then it's like, oh, okay, now we know what to rally around. And then you could put your company branding on there, your personality, and add a little bit of flair, have a little fun with it. But unless you have those essentials, you don't have a lot of dance or wiggle room.
No, I don't think I've ever worked at a company like just I've worked a lot of jobs, but I don't think I've ever worked at a company where the foundational information of the company has ever stuck with me, right? Like if you worked at Jamba Juice
Uh-huh.
years ago, do you remember? I mean, in onboarding, they always kind of like share stuff like that, right? But do you remember? Think about all the past jobs you have. Are you able to remember like what you were okay, keep this in mind. You were able to work for a company, which means you were in the back operational part. You're like involved. Is there any company you worked with that you remember like what they're all about?
I mean, you kind of just know what's around you, your environment, the people you work with. Um,
I don't
there's
I don't know
there.
if I can I don't know if I can securely say I fully remember what I never worked at Jamba Juice, but I'm just giving an example. Like I think I worked
Mhm.
at Abercrombie and Fitch at one time. So I can't tell you for the life of me like what Abercrombie and Fitch's foundation is all about.
Uh-huh.
And I was an employee there. You think I should know that stuff. So the
Right.
point is there's never been a company I've worked for that I've been able to remember anything about it except for the name and what they sell.
Right, right. Yeah, I would say so. That's probably pretty true for me as well. They try to I remember there's attempts to like, train people on like, leadership and all the different company history and things like that. And they try to get into some of that stuff. But I think maybe that's because it's something that's a weakness for a lot of businesses. How do you train on vision and values and purpose? um how do you get that
You mean
to
like
really.
they might struggle with like making that exciting?
Yeah, yeah, it's like, yeah, I know, it's like, how do you make those things because really it's like the elite, it's like the few people who founded the organization, that's their vision and values. But it's like almost like starting your own um organization of things. And how do you get everyone to buy into that? First of all, is it a little bit heavy, a little bit too much top down?
Mm.
Yeah, and yeah,
Well,
would it be a cool or a fun thing for people to really embrace?
it could get,
um
I know it could get boring. Like,
yeah.
okay, here's how we start. And well, let me revise. It's not so much about historical. It's more of just like, okay, I'm a smoothie company. Okay, let's just say that. So we sell smoothies. So it wouldn't be like we started in 1943, we did this. It would be more like, okay, we sell smoothies. Here's what we're all about. We're 100% vegan. Okay.
Hmm.
Here's all the details about our product, what makes it special. Our brand name was designed because the owner went to Africa and he was really intrigued by a certain fruit. So we call it this fruit smoothie thing, right? So you kind of
Hmm.
have an idea about like the personality of the business, not really the history. And
Hmm.
then you understand things like why do people like us, right? So maybe looking at reviews, like people like us because we generally see like people saying their customer service is amazing. I really like their smoothies are, whatever kind of thing you can get that makes you feel unique. It's kind of like that in a whole, just kind of getting to feel like I feel really confident that I know what this is about. It's like the reason why you use certain um it's kind of like how you use certain, like if you use Spotify for music, like I use Spotify for music and I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I love Spotify because I know how to use it and I've been using it for a long time.
Hmm.
So I'm familiar with like why I like to use it, right? Because I can choose music, it playlists, it does things how I like it. So if I was trying to explain this to you, James, I would be really excited and confident about it because I actually like it.
Mhm.
It's because I understand it, you know.
Mhm.
It's kind of more like that. But I think that's can be hard to explain if you don't even really know, or you just say some generic stuff that just kind of there's no substance to it. Imagine if
Yeah.
you had employees who were excited about their work because they had a better understanding on the company's personality,
Mhm.
right? Like that's why I always bring up Chick-fil-A, but that's why I wonder like the employees are so consistent. I was always thinking maybe it's the training that they give, but I thought, you know what? I wonder if they're so loyal to the process. I mean, typically I see them just, you know, my pleasure, thank you, have, you know, all that kind of stuff. I
Mhm.
wonder if they're more loyal to that because of the insights they get about the company, and it makes them like motivated to want to work for them because they have an understanding.
Right. Right. Yeah, maybe in the hiring process, the managers are looking for some key things, and they're like, "Yeah, this guy kind of already has what we're looking for," you know. And then once they're hired on board and starting to work, now they're just trained to a few key things, that just come out more naturally, right? So, training on how to say thank you, please, and it's my pleasure. And then when that person really says those things, they already are that kind of person, so it comes off a lot more natural, um, maybe they just, in the hiring process, that's where they got it figured out.
Right. Also, for me as a musician, like I tend to like guitar players that I'm able to kind of watch an interview about.
Hmm.
And depending on who the person is, I tend to like that person more or end up liking or get more excited about the style of guitar playing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So like when I'm not really I am not a, what's it called? Deep Purple. I'm not a major Deep Purple fan. It's not really like, I'm more of like a Led Zeppelin and Van Halen kind of guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So Deep Purple's not really my thing too much,
Hmm.
but you can't deny Smoke on the Water. You know, it's a classic song. But anyways, um, I started watching interviews and learning more about Steve Morse. He's the lead
Hmm.
guitarist of Deep Purple.
Hmm.
And I gotta tell you, after like looking him up a little bit, watching interviews and like checking out his extremely unique style of playing guitar, I'm
Right.
actually like a fan of him. So
Oh,
whenever I
okay.
talk to another guitar player, like Steve Morse is probably going to come up and I'm going to be excited about it. I'm like, dude, he's
Right.
got this finger thing. He's got this picking style. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So if you were able to, but it's because I understand it now,
Yeah. Totally.
but I
Totally.
also gravitate towards that. So
Yeah.
translate this into like potential. I don't know if this is true or not, but potentially like getting an understanding of a Chick-fil-A
Right.
might produce the sort of conformity to following rules more, following policies, or being excited about the company, you know?
Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. Maybe what do you think?
I mean, culture is what it is. It's like think about. I guess if we just took the company example and kind of like blew it up to the say state level or even national level, right? So it's like, how do I feel as being an American? I live in this great country. It's got, great things to enjoy, and I like the people in this area that I live, or this the country that I live in, and so it's like we have this air of patriotism, and if you think about it, the more people, like, the people who buy into that kind of culture, or understanding a little bit more, they're a lot more expressive, like during the 4th of July or during Memorial Day that we got coming up. I mean, people are a lot more expressive, like, when they show their sacrifice or service to the country, whether they go into the military or do something else. I mean, the different levels vary, right? You might have some people who, who maybe don't get so involved, but they still have that kind of heart for the country. You maybe have some people that pray for the president, or you maybe have the people go all the way and they serve, right? I mean, it just, the spectrum varies, but, and so does that understanding, like, how well do you understand what this company, or not this company, this country is based on, and the foundational principles, and the history does come into more play here now, but or even just like how much do you really like our leadership and believe in them. There's all kinds of things to look at, but like, I think it's very similar to like the company culture. It's like, how well do you know the
Yeah.
people? How well do you buy into the actual product or service we're offering, the good that it brings to the world or whatever it is? Do you really buy into it? And I think when you get a lot more buy-in, that's when you start, like, having people that really are like that model employee, or you're almost like your what's that, your poster child, right? Your poster
Yeah.
kids company walking around everywhere, right? So so it's, I guess the key phrase for me is just buy-in, is getting that right buy-in, and then why would people buy into it, right? Why
Right.
would, because it's got to go beyond the paycheck, because why would they work for a different company if two companies were equal, in the product, or the salary being offered and the benefits? What's the difference? It's the product, it's the company culture,
Yeah.
and what can you do to create buy-in, right?
Actually, I will say this. The things I usually remember from past jobs are the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Oh,
don't
okay.
mean like healthcare or dental or anything like that. I mean like, as an employee, you get a key card, which, by the way, key cards are cool. I don't know. If you get a key card at a job, I just feel like it just makes it so much more legitimate. It makes it
Yeah.
so much more fun.
Uh-huh.
Got to use a key card to open door. That's pretty cool. It just
Yeah,
adds
I
some sort of
understand that.
like,
Yeah.
you're just like, college was worth this. I got a key card.
Right. Yeah.
I did key cards. But I remember all those bonuses. Like as an employee, you get discounts at the smoothie thing downstairs, or you can utilize free car wash. It's kind of dumb stuff, but I remember things like that. I remember not specifically per se, but I remember like when I get jobs, there always was the ones that had really cool like bonuses that you just get as an employee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think the last sales job I ever did before I jumped into this whole thing was some of the bonuses you got were free massages
Yeah.
and free chiropractic visits.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but that's like the main thing I remember. I don't remember anything. I mean, if you told me, I still had the same lack of knowledge of the company. Like, what did you, that last sales position? I won't mention their name, but that last sales position, when I was pretty involved with them. So if you ask me now, what are they about? I could just probably tell you what their service was about, but I couldn't tell you anything about who they are in depth.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, if you work there, you can get some free massages. That's basically it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think so. Sometimes the benefits outweigh anything more deep. It's like, yeah, I'm just happy I got, a nice job. It's got some cool benefits. I have a nice, maybe a nice manager, a nice coworker.
Yeah.
People
How are
hang
you
out.
able to get that message to to the population outside your business to get business when I guarantee, like, ask your top performing sales professional, whoever that is. Ask them what do you know about XYZ company? I'm just curious. I would be willing to bet that you probably will be very surprised how little people know anything about the business. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like,
Right.
okay, here's something funny. It's kind of like you're like, you start dating this girl or something, and you're really into her. But then she asks you a personal question like, what's my favorite color? And you're like, oh, pink. And you're like, oh my gosh. Like I've
Right.
been with
Right.
you for like I've been with you for a year and you don't even know my, like,
Yeah.
it's like that kind of thing. And you're just like, oh, okay. So like you just
Right.
like her because it's appealing, but beyond that, you like don't know what her last name is. You don't know what her like what the name of her dog is. Like
Right. Right.
I think it's the
Yeah.
same thing. You're just like, oh my gosh.
Well, just to kind of like shed light on all this, think about like, I've heard the phrase, it says, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. It's like knowledge is great. Oh, what are the fun facts that I know? What kind of things have I learned over my course of schooling and working and family or whatever it is you learn. And so it's
Yeah.
like, what have I learned? But then it's like, knowledge has its place. It kind of definitely has a way of helping in life. But ultimately, knowledge just puffs people up. It's like, oh, I know more than you. I know more statistics in sports, or I know more on, Jeopardy trivia or whatever it is. I know more about, business or about sales or whatever. But then it's like, what does that really accomplish in relationships? But then I heard that love builds up. So it's like, love is more like that, you know, kind of the personality, the look and feel, kind of the, the unseen things. I just like the way that person talks to me. I just love the way, they listen to me or whatever. It's the non-tangibles, right? But they're as real or more real than sometimes just that piece of knowledge or information. So it's like, I don't know, one of my pet peeves is like, when you like, get like customer surveys, or you get like, companies asking for more information. They're trying to mine you for your knowledge and for your understanding. And it's like, you're like, oh my gosh, like, I don't need to go through all this or answer all these questions. And sometimes I do it to be helpful, but then at the same time, sometimes I get annoyed, by them. But like, it's people that are mining for knowledge. They want your information, your intelligence, and things like that. But ultimately, that's not really a relationship. Those are just like people trying to get more out of you. And but when you're looking at, companies that want to grow in their processes, in sales and marketing, I think if they just get stuck on the knowledge level, they're going to be limited. They're going to be very, very limited. It's like,
Oh, I
yeah,
I
they'll have
agree.
like, you know what I mean? They might have the canvas there. They might have the paint nicely lined up. They'll have all the brushes in place. They'll have a nice scenery to look at to paint, but then there's no artist to paint the picture. It's
Oh,
like they have all the bells and whistles. We look great, but then there's no results. There's no drawing. There's no painting. And so, we need to get that human element back, and also develop a process that's very human, I think relational, and you know what I mean? Like
dude.
something that could make a difference for them for the long term.
Well, I agree. Knowledge fault has a part of that. I feel like there's just no way. It's just so much harder to put a plan together when there's just a lack of knowledge on certain things, understanding. And what I find super funny with knowledge is knowledge can be a bitch sometimes. I mean, because think of it this way. So you don't know something, okay, and you want to learn about hockey. Or no, actually more, let's do more of a skill. Let's do more like sales, right? Sales is always a progression. It's never like an endpoint. You never like seriously, you never like master sales because every conversation is different. And there's all, if you listen back to every conversation, there's always something that you go, I could have done this better. I should have said that. It's always going to be like that. Um, and you start learning about sales, let's say, and you get really excited because like, oh my gosh, I know this line. I know the process. I know what to do. But then the process continues and you keep learning and then you get stuck and then you have to figure out how to move forward from that, make progression. So it's a process. And then you hit a point that you feel like I know so much. And then you hit a point where you go, oh my gosh, I really don't know much. I'm like learning new stuff. So I feel like I really don't know as much as I thought I did. And so you go through that, I know everything. And then you get discredited, like I don't know anything. Then you're like, I know everything, and then I don't. So knowledge is great, but it also shows you how much you don't know, which can be really discouraging. Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you don't know who he is, he's like a super big, famous astrophysicist.
Mm.
And he says this one thing that I just love. He's like, okay, I might butcher it, so I'm not going to quote it. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but he's like, oh, what is it? I'm going to really butcher this. It was like, um, a subject, something enough to think you know everything about it, but you don't know enough to know that you're wrong about it. I think that's right. So like you have enough knowledge to feel like you know enough about a subject, like you know everything. But the problem is you don't know enough to know that you actually don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. But that makes sense to me too, because I think that's why a lot of failed systems are put in place that don't work, because they're kind of in that little limbo.
Well, think about it this way, people specialize in things for a reason, right? And like, can you imagine if you're a widget company, you build widgets and you sell widgets, but then, you're trying to come up with a sales and marketing process for your company. Well, you're not really a sales expert. You're not really a marketing expert. So really the best person to go to wouldn't be yourself, but it would be to outsource, to go to an agency, a marketing agency, a sales agency, to help you with those things. And a lot of people fail to do that. They don't reach out. They think they just want to figure it out by themselves. They think, oh well, I've sold something in my lifetime, I could figure it out, But it's a whole different ball game, especially if you're getting into different arenas where there's more competition and things like that. It's always best to reach out to a professional who are the experts, and that's what really gets me is like, I think I mean, I shouldn't harp on this too much because I'm like that too sometimes. It's like, oh, I want to start a company or a product, and oh, I already know all this stuff. I have a little bit of experience, and I'll try to figure it out, and then what happens in the end? I go to the expert. I need some help in this, right? Can you help me out? But if we do that at the beginning, you save yourself a lot of time and heartache, and you learn a lot, and it's more fun. You grow, you develop, and you almost become an expert yourself because you're talking to an expert, So I wish people would outsource more and early on, and then develop a bona fide process that would help them, and they could implement their company culture and personality along the way, and they kind of get the best of both worlds then.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just it sounds so easy, but it is hard to do this. Like it's what takes most time normally. Like when I work with a company, this is the most boring part. It takes a long time to figure this out because sometimes it might even have to do with like restructuring a bit, or sometimes the problems are not even what they think it is. Like it's not a systematic issue. It's more of like a perceptive issue, right? This
Mhm.
kind of goes into like the human psychology thing a little bit. Their message, whatever they think they're saying, might not be what the population is perceiving from them. Like I'm trying to tell people we're the best bar soap on earth, but their message is not portraying. It's saying like, because people do that. They'll say like, oh, I thought it said it was the worst bar soap on earth. And you're like, what? No, that happens. Like people, I always wonder, like, it's so crazy how imbalanced people's perception can be as a population. Their perception is like balance. It's like a giant boulder balancing on a needle. You know what I mean? The needle's standing straight up and there's a boulder on top of it keeping balance. And literally, like if an atom bumped into that rock, it would tip over, or
Right.
it would go to either side. And that's like perception of population. It's so easy to just kind of just the little tap, and then that just spreads, and perception is going to be perceived however it's supposed to. So it's a really sensitive attribute of people, you know. It really
Yeah,
is.
it really is, and especially when people become more irritable or on edge, say it's like a deadline or month end or quarter or year end, as for businesses goes, it's like, hey, it's year end and we haven't hit our goals, and it's like, what are we gonna do? And all of a sudden there's the stress levels just rise, and the tension in the air rises in the company, and people are on edge. So it's like, that could be that thing that's like the tipping point of, like, from a company's success or their demise. It's like, a customer might say a little bit of a criticism, like, oh, well, you told me this last week and now you changed your mind on it, and I don't get it, what's going on? And then you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much stress already, and I don't know how to answer this question, and you might just fumble in your words. The customer sees that you're kind of on edge and you're not really all with it, so it's like, oh, well, you know what, I don't know if I want to move forward right now, I just don't feel it right now. And there you go, you lost a sale. So it's like there's so many factors that come into play when it comes to that. Like it's human psychology, it's the realities of business, and
Yeah.
just customer relationships. Like, how, so I go back to relationships because I always ask that question: how well do you know your customer? And even before that question, how well do you know your prospect?
Well,
If people did more analysis and study on their prospects, they would first of all get those leads to come in a little faster, and then once they close those deals and they have customers, if they really if they really understood that client before signing them up, they would have that relationship that would be a lot better. So when these times do come and stress is in the air, like right now is a perfect example, the climate changes, there's more stress for people. Those customers, guess what? They're still going to be loyal. They're still going to be like, you know what? I'm with you. I understand what's going on. Don't worry about it. You'll get a lot more love from your customers.
yeah. I would almost challenge that a little bit and say, before you try to figure out what your customers in that, I would say you should really try to figure out you and your business first. If you're having challenges and you don't know how to solve them, it's probably because you've lost touch with one or all three of those um, steps I mentioned. Foundation, you don't even know your challenges, and you don't even have specific goals set. And if you can't get that figured out, you're just going to be guessing on who your customers are. Now, not every extent. I mean, you can probably go, well, I want to work with this person, with this type of company. But it's going to be a lot harder to bring someone on when you're kind of unorganized in that way. It's just going to make everything more complicated.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with that, Daniel. You got to look at yourself first, and the foundations before your surroundings. So yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, I mean, but once you get to that point, you've been in business 5 or 10 years and you're like, you know what, I kind of know what I'm doing now. You really got to think about your prospect, think about your
Yeah.
customers.
And
But
even at
yeah, you're
that
totally
point,
right.
you might think you know what you're doing, potentially.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. I mean, ultimately, it's like, yeah, it's like the whole philosophy of, like, do men ever or guys ever grow up? It's like, I'm still this immature boy. I'm like 50 years old. What's
Yeah.
going on?
But I would love, last thing I'm going to say, and I think it's a good place for us to end. Last thing I want to say is, if Jeff Bezos is listening to this podcast, which I know he probably is because we're super cool,
Right.
I would guarantee to bet on this. Okay, I bet you that if we ask him the question, like, this is a little vague, right? But if we ask them something along the lines of, do you still know what you're doing? Like, do you know what you're doing and every the game, I guess just could be basically that. Like, do you know what you're doing in this whole thing? I guarantee it's not going to be the answer you thought he would say. Like, I don't know if he'll flat out, I don't think he'll flat out say, yes, I know exactly what I'm doing. He's probably going like, no, not really. I mean, sometimes we have plans on what to like accomplish, but for the most part, um, I bet you there will be a shocking answer. I don't think it's going to be as clear as day as you think it might be.
Yeah, that's very telling. I mean, and that to me, if a leader is able to speak with a little bit of brokenness and humility, I think they're in a better place than someone who's just like, I got it all figured out. I mean, that
Yeah.
to me is someone who's like, I really feel like if you're a student, at any level of your in your company, if you're the CEO or someone on the lower end of things, like if you're a good learner, a good student, that you will always grow and become better every day, and you'll eventually be where you want to be, and then at that point you could turn and help other people. So I mean, I think my posture is like I try at least to be someone of someone who's a humble and a learner, someone who wants to
Yeah.
grow every day.
Yeah. Deep, man. Deep.
Yeah, no, I know. That was good, man. Well, yeah, honestly, I think we covered a lot of bases as far as, processes, reaching out to people who can help you. But then, like, Daniel pointed out, look first within yourself and your own organization, develop that first, and then start reaching out to grow with others. Well, friends, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us today at Peppers and Flowers. We look forward to joining you again next Saturday. Daniel and James signing off.